never like this make dramatic or something, you know. It's a fight, we are professional fighters and people will watch anyways, you know. Then it was one guy, the spoiled guy who called me after our fight. He said, oh Merab, like, don't post picture of me, it was just, we just build the fight. Or I'm like, bro, why you did this? You know, you don't need to do this.
A top fighter suddenly pulled out of UFC 324, shaking the entire card and leaving fans scrambling for answers. Then, Merab Dvalishvili lit up the MMA world by revealing a behind-the-scenes moment with a UFC manager that he says crossed the line, and trust me, he did not hold back. And as if that wasn't enough drama for 1 week, Dricus du Plessis stepped in with his own blast, calling out a contender in a way that shocked even longtime fans. Make sure to subscribe to MMA Desk and let's dive right in the video. Merab Dvalishvili is known as a non-stop wrestler, the kind of fighter who will shoot for takedown after takedown until you break. So when he started talking about knocking Petr Yan out, a lot of fans did a double take. He said he can wake up and fight any day. That fighting is just what he does. To him, it sounded simple, but to everyone watching, this wasn't normal pre-fight talk. This was Merab trying to change the way people see him. He doesn't want to be labeled as just a wrestler anymore. He wants fans and future opponents to know that if they're only worried about takedowns, they might not see the punch that puts them on the canvas. This kind of talk builds a different kind of pressure. If he goes out there and actually knocks Yan down or finishes him, people will remember he called it ahead of time. But behind the confidence and smiles, there was something else bothering him.
Decisive on Umar beating Merab, that like Merab just got another level of respect for me for what he was able to do, man. He beat a young 29-year-old young ego who was undefeated.
During media day, Merab told a strange story. After one of his fights, he said the guy he beat called him and asked him not to post any pictures from the fight. Not only that, the fighter's manager or assistant called too, pushing the same thing. They said it was all just building the fight, that the trash talk and tension were fake. Merab didn't like that at all. He said MMA fans will watch real fights anyway, so why act fake and pretend to hate someone just for clicks? You could see how annoyed he was retelling it. For him, this wasn't just about one phone call. It felt like a sign that some people in the game care more about fake drama than real respect. And that, as you'll see, ties directly into his bigger problem with a certain rising contender. The phone calls bothered Merab, but the real wound came from the words that followed online. In his mind, there's a big difference between talking a little trash to sell a fight and calling someone a fake champion. Merab said that Umar, or at least Umar's camp, used that exact phrase about him. That hit a nerve. He worked for years, fought top guys, and took big risks to get to the belt. When someone says his belt isn't real, they're not just talking about one fight. They're trying to erase all the work it took to get there.
Second Cheeto rematch, there was like animosity. I really, truly wanted to beat the fuck out of him. Like I felt like I really didn't like him at that time, and I had such a good performance. It felt so good. I almost forced myself to not like Merab, but it wasn't like genuine. I want to go out there and put on a beautiful performance because I love this sport, not necessarily because I don't like Merab.
Merab doesn't speak perfect English, and he knows that. But he said when he posts something, even if he asks friends to help translate, the words are still his own. It's his voice. What really bothered him was the idea that somebody else might be tweeting for Umar. Merab hinted that Umar had a helper handling social media, one who might be firing off shots that weren't even his real words. To Merab, that's weak. In his view, if you have something bold to say it yourself. You stand behind it. You don't hide behind an assistant, a manager, or a team member. This is more than just social media drama. It's about what kind of man you are when the cameras aren't rolling. Merab made it clear that if you beat a champion, you want that champion to be respected. Otherwise, what does that say about your own win? If you think the champion is a joke, then your victory doesn't mean much. That's why he was so mad about the fake champion line. It felt like a direct shot at everything he earned. And while this tension simmers in the bantamweight division, another storm was brewing at middleweight. While Merab was trying to set the record straight with Umar, Dricus du Plessis was already aiming at his next target. After losing his belt to Khamzat, Dricus could have gone after a money fight or waited for the perfect moment. Instead, he started talking about Brendan Allen. He didn't say it softly either. Dricus said he would love to smash Allen's face in. It sounded personal, even if he also tried to keep things about rankings and title shots.
People are breaking down my style and saying how smart it is. And a lot of those things, I go, what are you talking about? I don't even think about that. People are going, oh, look how he's planned, he steps inside with his foot, then outside. And I go, what?
He pointed out that Allen is only on a 2-fight win streak and questioned whether that's enough to be calling out a former champion. But at the same time, Dricus said he doesn't really care who he fights, as long as the matchup gets him back to his belt as fast as possible. What really stood out was how Dricus talked about style. He brought up his own fight with Khamzat and mentioned JDM's fight with Islam. He admitted those were dominant performances with long stretches of control, but he also said they weren't fun to watch. In fact, he said he got bored in his own fight because he was stuck on the ground so long. That's a rare thing to admit. Most fighters would never say they were bored while getting controlled, but Dricus was honest. Fans want action. They want danger. They want to feel like anything can happen at any second, not just see one guy glued to the other for 20 minutes. It's a risky thing to say in a sport where wrestling often wins fights, yet he still said it. For him, the perfect opponent is someone who helps build a path back to the title and gives fans a fight they'll actually enjoy watching. And while Dricus was calling out a new rival, another former champion was stuck in a different kind of fight, one over legacy. Tyron Woodley has never been shy about how he sees his place in MMA history, and this time he turned that energy toward Kamaru Usman. Woodley said straight up that he doesn't believe Kamaru is the greatest welterweight of all time. He pointed to his own run, talking about how he went through names like Demian Maia, Robbie Lawler, and Wonderboy Thompson.
When you hear Dana say that Kamaru is the greatest welterweight of all time, do you roll your eyes and just say, like,
Kamaru is not the greatest welterweight of all time. He's saying that because, okay, I'm the realist. I had the realest route. I had the realest reign. I was a person that dealt with the most stuff behind the scenes and still managed to win that I don't even speak about, right? I fought all the top contenders that were not big trash talkers.
Those fights were not easy, and Woodley wants the world to remember that. He also suggested that Kamaru stayed in Dana White's good graces, saying Kamaru would accept every fight just to stay on the boss's good side. That kind of comment cuts deep because it makes it sound like Kamaru's success came from politics, not just hard work and talent. When Kamaru heard all this, he didn't blow it off. On his podcast, he sounded honestly hurt. He said he used to be a real fan of Woodley, that he liked how Woodley carried himself and what he did for the division, but now every time he hears Woodley talk, it feels negative. It's not just about him, but about his team and his manager. Kamaru said he doesn't know what he did to deserve that kind of hate. From his side, their story wasn't personal. They fought, he won, and then he moved on. The GOAT talk got even louder when Carlos Prates said Kamaru was the welterweight GOAT, only for Ariel Helwani to shut that down and remind everyone about Georges St. Pierre. That moment showed how divided fans really are about this topic. Is greatness about who you beat, how long you stayed champion, or something else? While the legends argued about the past, a new wave of fighters was focused on the future. Joshua Van walked into his title shot with a very different mindset. Born in the 2000s, he has a chance to become the first UFC champion from that generation. That alone is a big story, but the way he got here might be even more impressive.
You called Pantoja the flyweight GOAT. So not only do you have the opportunity to win gold and become the first fighter born in the 2000s, but dethrone the one you consider the greatest. So what do you make of this fight?
Like I said, man, it's a blessing to be in a cage with one of the greatest of all time, Saturday night, I'm going to take his belt, but it's all respect and love at the end of the day, man.
In just 5 years, he fought 21 times. That's an insane pace in modern MMA. Most fighters are happy to get 2 or 3 fights a year. Van is averaging 5. That kind of schedule builds experience fast. It also builds confidence. When you fight that often, walking to the cage starts to feel normal, like going to work. But this time, Van made it clear that he isn't walking in with the old, "it's okay if I lose, I'll just learn from it" mindset. For this fight, that mentality is gone. He says he's here to take the belt. Period. What's interesting is how much respect he has for the man standing in his way. Van called Pantoja the greatest flyweight of all time in his eyes, not Demetrius Johnson, who many fans see as the GOAT of that division. Joshua admitted part of it is about timing. He started really watching the sport after 2017, when Demetrius had already done most of his work. For him, Pantoja was the guy on top when he arrived, so that's who he connected with. On the other side, Pantoja has his own huge goal. He said he's chasing that number 1 pound-for-pound spot, even with monsters like Islam, Pereira, and others in the way. He knows it's hard, maybe even unlikely, but just being in that conversation already means he's done something special. Between a young challenger trying to become the first champ from his generation and a reigning champ chasing all-time greatness, this fight carries more weight than just another title defense. And all of this was building during the last big stretch of the UFC calendar, right as a flood of new news started hitting back-to-back. In the middle of all this drama, the UFC schedule itself kept changing. One of the new pieces of news came from Torres Finney. On a podcast, he casually dropped the update that he'd be fighting Jacob Malkoun at UFC 325, and he sounded excited about going all the way to Australia for it. For him, it's a big chance to show his skills on a global stage. Then out of nowhere, fans heard about Colby Covington facing Luke Rockhold at a real American freestyle event in January. Covington hadn't fought at all in 2025, and many people were wondering when he'd show up again. This matchup might not be in the UFC, but it gives him a chance to shake off ring rust and stay in the spotlight. Paulo Costa also jumped into the news cycle by calling out Roman Dolidze for a fight in February. He posted about it, talking like he owed something back to the fight game after sharing his gifts with the world. The call-out made sense. Dolidze's coming off a loss, Costa just picked up a decision win over Roman Kopylov, and both men like to stand and trade. That's the kind of matchup fans circle on the calendar. At the same time, Beneil Dariush was quietly working through a very different decision. He talked about testing his body to see if a move up to welterweight made sense. At around 185 to 186 pounds with low body fat, he wondered if cutting all the way down to lightweight was still healthy. He went so far as to do scans and even talk to the UFC about more testing. Then, as if the news needed one more twist, Paddy Pimblett got clipped and knocked down during a charity event. It wasn't a UFC fight, but the clip spread fast. Fans laughed, debated how serious it was, and of course made memes. But the bigger point was clear. Even when UFC events are on a short break, the MMA world never really stops. And that made what happened next even more shocking. The last big pay-per-view of the year was supposed to have a strong matchup between Rose Namajunas and Alexa Grasso at UFC 324. Then, almost out of nowhere, word came out that Grasso was out of the fight. There was no clear reason given, no long explanation, just the news that she was off the card. Fans started guessing right away. Was it an injury? Was it something personal? Nobody knew. But one thing was sure, losing a name like Grasso so close to a big event is a huge hit. The UFC, though, didn't let the matchup collapse. They moved fast and found a replacement for Rose. The surprise came when they locked in Natalia Silva as the new opponent. Silva is not a safe late replacement. She's on a strong winning streak in the UFC, and to make it more wild, her last win came against Grasso herself. That means Rose isn't just fighting a new opponent. She's fighting the woman who already beat the fighter she was supposed to face. Silva said the UFC told her Valentina wouldn't be ready for January and asked her to fight one more time. She didn't even know what happened with Grasso, but she didn't hesitate. She said that if she wants to be champion, she has to accept every challenge. When she talked about Rose, she praised her footwork and her ability to mix in takedowns when she feels uncomfortable in striking exchanges. That shows Silva and her team are taking this fight seriously. They're already studying Rose, building a game plan, and treating this like the biggest opportunity of her career. For Rose, this is a completely different kind of test than what she prepared for. For fans, it's the exact kind of last-minute twist that can turn a normal card into something unforgettable. And as that chaos unfolded, one man's story kept looping back to the same word: respect. For Merab, everything keeps coming back to how fighters carry themselves outside the cage. He can accept losing. He can accept people thinking someone else is better. What he struggles with is being called a fake champion by someone he feels hasn't walked the road he has yet. When he talked about Umar again, he repeated that the lack of respect is what stung the most. If you're fighting for a title, you don't want to believe the champion is a joke. You want to beat someone real, someone dangerous, so that when your hand is raised, it actually means something. That's how he sees it. In his mind, when Umar or his camp called him fake, they weren't just throwing random words. They were trying to tear down the whole ladder he climbed. He also doubled down on the social media part. Merab said that even though his English isn't great, he never lets anyone else control his message. He might ask for help translating, but the thoughts, the feelings, the jokes, and the callouts are all his. So when he looks across the division and sees another fighter letting assistants or managers tweet for them, it doesn't sit right with him. It feels like a game instead of a fight, and Merab doesn't see this as a game. That's why he says this isn't just about wins and losses. It's about what kind of man you are when the belt is on your shoulder and when it's not. If he and Umar meet again, the tension will be about more than just rankings. It will be about proving who is real, who earned everything they have, and who's willing to stand behind their words the same way they stand behind their punches. With so many stories exploding at the same time, fighters pulling out at the last minute, champions calling each other out, rising stars chasing history, and hidden feuds bubbling up behind the scenes, it's clear the UFC is entering one of its most chaotic and unpredictable stretches in years. Every fighter has something to prove, whether it's Merab fighting for respect, Dricus pushing for another shot at gold, or Rose being thrown into a completely new challenge with barely any time to adjust. And with sudden matchups being made, surprise callouts, and backstage drama spilling into the open, each week feels like a brand new chapter in a book no one can put down. What makes it even more intense is that none of these stories are finished. Merab's rivalry still feels like it's growing. The UFC 324 shakeup could change the division's direction, and fighters like Joshua Van and Pantoja are trying to rewrite history in real time. Every twist raises more questions, and every question makes the next event even more exciting. The only thing we can be sure of is that the landscape is shifting fast, and the next shock might already be on its way. If you want to stay ahead of every twist, every rivalry, and every breaking story in the MMA world, make sure you subscribe to MMA Desk so you never miss an update.